we're ready to do block number 3, our Missouri dogwood block. And this one is an applique block, which we don't ask you to do a lot, but we are asking you to do it sometimes. And so this one was the first time that we're asking you to do it. And so we are going to show you a couple of ways to applique so that you get an idea of how it works. There are 3 standard ways that we applique. The easiest and fastest way to applique is to use Wonder Under. Comes in a roll, paper on one side, bumpy, sticky on the other side. The sticky side is your glue. So you have to be careful not to get it hot and not to get it torn. You want to make sure that this stays safe. So the first thing you do when you're doing Wonder Under is you take your pattern piece, and this one is our center for the flower, and you're going to draw that right on the paper. So we are going to make it exactly the size that our center needs to be. Ta-da! So we've got it. The next thing we need to do, and I'm going to cut that off, is iron that to the wrong side of your fabric. So this one's the bright, here's the dull. I'm going to put it on the back. As long as you've got fabric under all parts of the paper, you're going to be okay. Otherwise, it's going to iron to your ironing board and glue the fabric to your ironing board and ruin your iron. Make it hard to clean. So do it. Make sure that you've got fabric completely under it. We're going to iron this in place, and you're just going to press it down so that you've got a nice seal, and don't play with it until it gets cool. You've got to let that glue sit. Once you get it set, it's almost cool. Once you get it set, you're going to carefully cut it out right on the line. And this is going to be the exact size you need. Okay, so there it is. In order to get that paper off, the easiest way is to just run your thumbnail against it and it'll lift off. And when you pull it away, you can feel the glue on the fabric. This will now be ready to put right in the middle of your flower. And this is what I've done with this whole block. I've done Wonder Under. You put everything where you want it to be. You're very careful and make sure that it looks exactly the way you want. And then starting from the middle, you iron it down. In fact, one of the things I would do is just touch it in each of the places so that it starts to glue into place and it won't wiggle around on you, because you want it to be as smooth as you can. This one was, like I said, done completely this way. And so you lay it on, it should be exactly the way you want it. And you make sure that it's pressed really very well down. When you have it all done, there are people who leave it raw edged. I don't recommend that if you're going to iron it or if you're going to wash it. It might make it look fringy around the edges, a little frayed, and it could even eventually start to come off. So what I did with this is I took, the sewing machine had a stitch that looks a lot like a buttonhole stitch. And I just carefully and slowly sewed all the way around all of my pieces. You can see I came over here and then I came back and started here so that there's not a stitch underneath, only on the raw edges that show. And you make sure that you do that to all of the edges. Doesn't have to be this stitch. If you've just got a simple zigzag, that works just fine too. You can just zigzag it down, and as long as you're close to the edge or on the edge, it will close all of those little stray threads in place, and you won't get that frayed look that we're not looking for in this particular project. There might be another time you want that, but not here. Okay. Method number 2 is done with interfacing, and a lightweight interfacing works a little bit better. You can see that this one's not too heavy. It kind of wiggles around You could even go a little more lightweight if you needed to, because you want to make sure that it's not going to interfere with the way your fabric moves. So what we end up doing, we take the interfacing and we put the soft side of the interfacing down. So it looks like you're going to iron your fabric to it, but you're not. So you put the little glue dots up, you put the right side of your fabric down on top of that. I'm going to do it on this corner. And then you put your pattern on there. And you need to leave a little bit of space all the way around. At least 1/8 of an inch. 1/4 of an inch would be even better, and then once you're ready to work with it, you're going to trim it down to 1/8 of an inch. And in order to make sure that you're getting it the right size, you're going to carefully, on your fabric, draw the pattern. You can use a regular pencil if your fabric is not a white. I'm using the fabric pencil because I don't know how much of it's going to show, but I want to be able to see it. And I don't think that very much of it's going to show, but it is on the edge of your fabric. So we've got the two pieces, right side to glue side, and we sew right on the line all the way around. When you're finished sewing it all the way around and you cut it out, you're going to have the shape that you're applying, whatever it is. And in order to get the right side of the fabric out, we're going to cut a little slit right here in the middle of the interfacing and just flip it right side out. Carefully move your chopstick or the edge of a knife or something all the way around to make sure that you've got smooth curves and that your point is done. And with any point, you know, you have to trim it just a little bit tighter on the corners in order to make sure that there's not a big pucker of fabric in that corner. But you don't want to get too close to the stitches. Make sure that there's at least 2 or 3 threads of fabric so that it will stay in that shape. When you turn it right side out, it makes the curve, and it's a smooth curve, and it's all folded in, and everything is in place, and you set it on your fabric, and you get everything positioned, and then you can press it. And this interfacing is going to stick to your background fabric so that it doesn't move, and you're not going to have to worry about whether or not it's going to stay in place. So if you're using sew-in interfacing, you want to make sure that you use pins to keep it in place so it doesn't shift. You're also going to sew it in layers. So in this one, when you turn your leaf right side out and you place it, take everything off and sew these before you iron anything else on. So you're going to do your leaves, and then you're going to reposition your flower petals, and you're going to press them in place, and you're going to sew all the way around all of the pieces. They're going to overlap slightly, so where they overlap, you only have to do the one side. You don't have to do them one at a time. You can go ahead and put them down and sew everything, and where they overlap, just do the top piece and sew it all the way around. That is the interfacing style, and there's again 2 ways you can do that. Because it's such a nice smooth edge, you can make that hand sewn and it will look really pretty. I suggest using the color of your fabric, not necessarily your background, but your fabric, so that the stitches don't show. But if you're careful enough, you can just use a gray on everything, and like you do if you are sewing a patch, and they are all going to just disappear into the fabric colors. She did white, but you can just barely see her stitches in the green, just barely, and that's how you would applique down using interfacing. The last method is the most difficult. So we're going to take our little square here, and we need to cut it bigger than the fabric. The fabric needs to be bigger than the pattern by 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. 1/8 of an inch is better, and I will show you why. Okay. So we cut it out, and I am going bigger here. Okay, and here I'm going a little smaller because that's an inside curve. All right, this is called needle turn. This is the most traditional. Hundreds of years people have been doing this kind of applique. And so long before interfacing and wonder under were invented, people did it this way. And there are a lot of people who still love it this way. So needle turn is a good thing to learn. The curve is going to have to be clipped because you know that any place that there is a curve or a point, we have to have maneuverable fabric. So I'm cutting this and you can see that's a very small section, but you want to make sure that you're able to fold everything underneath. That's what needle turn means. With your needle, you turn the fabric and then stitch it down. So I am going to grab my fabric and show you how this is done. I don't trust my seam allowances. I don't think that that's even all the way around. And if you look at it, you can see it's not even all the way around. So I'm going to use my fabric pencil that erases, my pen that erases. And I'm just going to stitch on this line. And we're just going to do this section. So as you can see, my line is just barely there. And that's the edge of the flower. So when I take my needle, and I'm using gray because it's different colors, I've cut this bigger than 12.5 inches because when you do applique, it might stretch or pinch your fabric a little. So I always start with a larger square for my background. I'm going to come up, hang on, I'm going to pin it in place. This will move on me, and I don't want it to get way off and look puckered. So I want to make sure that it's in the right spot before I even start. There we go. I'm going to take my needle, and I'm going to come up right here at this corner where we're beginning, right here. But not through this fabric yet. So I pull it through, I push with my needle and fold that right on the line and stitch right here. Stitch number 1. Then I go back in and I move over 1/8 of an inch or so, and I stitch again. If you use the same color of thread, it's not going to be as noticeable. If you don't, you need to make sure you're using tiny stitches so that they don't show. Now I'm here where it's not folded anymore, and I take my needle and I fold it under. That's the needle turn. And we make another stitch. And there's my line, so I'm going to fold under again. And catch it. Okay. You go all the way. You can see that that's sewn down now along there. and you go all the way around. One of the things that when I'm drawing my line, and you can see that my pen is already fading away, so you might have to do it a few times, is to keep this close by so that as I do this, I can continue to add the fabric, the pin, the sewing line on as we go around. And it looks like I didn't go quite deep enough, and that's why my V isn't showing up very well when I get to the center here. So when I got to this point, I would grab my scissors and sew it all the way into that point, but not necessarily before I get there, because it's going to fray if you have it cut for too long. So wait till you get there. This is going to be much smaller and easier to turn because it's so narrow than this. And when you do a point like this, you're going to fold the whole thing back, straight back, before you get to that point. Like this. So as you come up to it, I'd even pin it if I were doing it for real. As you come up to it, you will fold this under, and this will already be in place. So that when you get to the point, you've got these cuts on this curve that will slowly turn in to finish that edge along there. Okay? And that's how we applicate. You take care of all of your pieces, you get them all sewn into place, you use whichever method is easiest for you. It doesn't matter to us. And if you've never done it, you might want to do all of it as wonder under, and nobody is going to judge you for that at all. If you want to learn this and you've tried these other methods, this might be a good way. You can combine them. You can do the needle turn on one part and the wonder under on another part, and when you're finished, nobody's going to be able to see one way or another the detail that you went to in order to make this. So you do it whatever way is best for you. And then iron it out, lay it flat, and trim it back down to your 12.5 inches. And you'll have your dogwood